We are here today with Jan Hill, and she has a marvelous testimony and story to tell us about her interactions with the church and her religious upbringing. Uh, Many of these interviews are a question and answer. I sent Jan the questions, and she answered them all in a beautiful writing. She is a very talented writer and a very talented pianist. She is an elder, currently attends our St. Paul, Minnesota congregation. I know that you will enjoy her telling of her church history as much as I enjoyed reading it. So, Jan, I'm going to ask you just to go ahead and start at your beginning.
Thank you, Becky. I will. At almost the end of the year and almost the end of the decade, I was born on December 23, 1938, in the northwest bedroom of a farm home just a few miles northwest of Lamoni, Iowa, in a little farming community called Bloomington. The neighborhood congregated around a small, square, white schoolhouse called Center School, and a small, square, gray cement block church, the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. My grandparents and my mother were members of the church, and my dad joined just a few years after my birth. My parents farmed and lived with my mother's parents, and it was through my grandpa, Frederick Ford, my mother's father, that I trace my heritage in the church. Grandpa's parents were born in England and immigrated to the United States in the mid-1800s. The church was a very most central part of our family life. My parents taught me to pray when I was barely old enough to form the words. I heard my mother tell how I started my prayers with, "Dear Dee Dee." One night after prayer, when I was a little older, I said to her, "Mama, I want to see this Jesus I pray at." I don't remember any of that. It's just what my mother has told me. My earliest memory of church is of a Sunday evening service in the Bloomington church when I was not yet 3 years old. While the rest of the congregation participated in the worship service in that little country church, I put my head on my mom's lap to rest, and I looked up at the kerosene lanterns hanging from the ceiling. The dim yellow light and flickering flame lulled me off to sleep in that comfortable setting among friends. My parents and grandparents made the decision to leave the farm and move into Lamoni. The town of Lamoni had been established as headquarters for the RLDS Church some 60 years before my birth. Many of the town's folks were members of the church, and Lamoni was home to a large and thriving congregation. The Brick Church, as it was called, was the home for the congregation, but it had burned to the ground in 1931. So when our family started going to church in Lamoni in the early 1940s, the congregation met in the Coliseum, the local movie theater. 11 o'clock worship services were held in the main auditorium where the movies were shown on weeknights and Saturdays. The children's classes and youth classes met in various other places around town, and the kindergarten and primary classes that I attended met in the second story of White's Furniture Store on the corner of Main and Linden Street. I remember climbing the long metal stairway on the outside of the building up to the second floor where the Sunday school was held. As I think of it now, it seems like an unsafe arrangement for little children, but to my knowledge, there were never any mishaps. We children were met at the top of the stairs by the faithful deacon, Neil Campbell, who greeted us and got us into our right places. Vera Prawl played the piano while we marched in. My parents wanted to become better, more committed saints and to establish a Zionic home and family life. The three of us usually had our nightly prayers together. We never missed a Sunday at church, and we always attended Wednesday evening prayer services, held in the homes of our neighbors, and sometimes our home. Since I was the only child of my parents during that time, I went wherever they went. I heard the sermons they heard. I heard the prayers and testimonies of the saints. I learned the hymns. I attended state conference with my parents and heard the discussions around issues sometimes heated. I remember once there was a quite lively discussion as to whether Lamoni Stake should furnish a car for the church appointee, 70 Virgil Billings. I went to reunion with my parents and met people from other congregations in Lamoni Stake, and also men from church headquarters who came to minister in the area. We had Sunday evening services in Lamoni in those days, and in the summertime, evening church was held out of doors in Central Park. The park benches were lined up in semicircular rows, and cords with bare light bulbs were strung overhead. After supper on Sundays, my parents and I would walk to the park and sit on the park benches under the big shady elm trees. Summers can be hot and humid in southern Iowa, but by the time the song service started, it would be a little cooler. We sang good old hymns in 4-part harmony, like David H. Smith's "A Calm and Gentle Quiet Reigns Tonight. There's not a cloud upon a single brow, and every heart is swelling with delight, for peace is brooding sweetly o'er us now. Then let us render service to the Lord and drive those clouds of fear and doubt away, that we may all rejoice with one accord until the dawning of that perfect day." We sang Mary Ann Lathbury's Evening Praise. Day is dying in the west. Heaven is touching earth with rest. Wait and worship while the night sets her evening lamps alight through all the sky. Holy, 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 Lord God of hosts. Heaven and earth are full of thee. Heaven and earth are praising thee, O Lord Most High. On those hot summer evenings, the cicadas would hum accompaniment from the trees. And when it got a little cooler, we could hear the echoing birds' calls. As darkness fell, sweet coolness also descended. When church was over, I would walk home with my parents along the darkened streets, lighted at every corner by a dim yellow street lamp. The dew had fallen, the crickets chirped, and moths hovered under the street lamps. I could hear my parents talking quietly together as we walked, and sometimes neighbors would walk with us. I was baptized and confirmed a member of the RLDS Church on March 23, 1947. The service was held in the Lamoni Coliseum, and the baptismal font was a new stock tank the men had brought in and filled with water. Roy Stearns, a Graceland College student from Everett, Washington, who later became World Church Secretary, baptized me, and I was confirmed by 2 local elders, Willard Moon, who owned and operated the flour mill, and Morton Edmonds, who drove a van and delivered groceries from the local Hy-Vee store to the homes of the townspeople. I went with my parents to World Conference in Independence, Missouri, called General Conference in those days. I saw the unfinished auditorium, the gray, bare concrete ramps, and the park benches where the congregation sat in the conference chamber. I also saw the president of the church and the apostles and other church leaders. I remember seeing presiding patriarch Albert A. Smith, Joseph Smith Jr.'s nephew, in the crowd as he walked by close to me. I saw the stone church across the street north of the auditorium with its rich wood interior and bright stained glass windows. It was more beautiful than any church I had ever seen. Reunions in Lamoni Stake were held on Graceland College campus. People would stay the week in tents that were pitched in a semicircle around the south end of the football field. The men would set up larger tents for the children's classes and a huge tent for the preaching services. They hauled in park benches from Central Park for seating. When I was young, my mom would sit on the outside edge of a row and put a blanket beside her on the ground for me to be on during the evening services. I loved that arrangement because I could hear the singing, but also as the evening darkened, I could lie down and look up at the stars. I remember one particular time when I tried my best to count the stars and realized how utterly impossible it was to number all the stars that God had made. There were a group of kids older than me who regularly came to reunion. I looked up to them so much and dreamed of the time when I could be like them. One girl, who was about 3 years older than me, gave a testimony saying that her hope in life was to be the wife of a missionary. I thought that was marvelous, and I wondered if I could ever do that. It was a high and most worthy calling that a young woman of that day aspired to. The 1950s were faith-growing years for me. On warm summer evenings in Lamoni, I would often walk up the hill to the Graceland College campus. It was quiet and deserted in the summer when no students were there. On these evening walks, I would look up at the stars and try to verbalize to God my questions about creation and life and my place in it. And like most teenagers, I wanted God to tell me who I should marry and what I should do with my life. Even though I did not immediately receive answers to any of those questions, I experienced the remarkable understanding that God loved me, was with me, and would always be with me. On some summer mornings, I would get up at 4 a.m. while it was still dark and walk to my favorite place on campus. There I would sit very still and listen and watch the infinitesimally small increments of light change the world from darkness to daylight. It was nature revealing God to me. I longed to know more, and more than anything, I wanted the Holy Spirit to be a part of my life. By the time I was a teenager, reunions were still held on Graceland campus, but now people stayed in the dorm rooms and services were held in the student center, and classes met in the classrooms. I remember one noon hour between activities. I was by myself and I wandered into one of the classrooms that had a piano in it. I sat down and opened the hymnal and played hymn number 267, Jesus, Thou Joy of Loving Hearts. As I played, the melody and the harmony of that simple hymn became unbelievingly beautiful to me, more beautiful than I had ever heard it before. I played it over and over with tears in my eyes. It was magical, and I kept thinking to myself, God, this song is for you. It was a defining moment for me, and I knew that more than anything, I wanted my life to be for God. I've had many wonderful experiences in my 86 years, but those are stories for another day. Bye for now.
Jan, I'm not going to let you go quite so quickly. I just want to have to say, I sit here with tears in my eyes about some of this, as it reminds me so much of my own youth and reunions and going to the World Conference when the auditorium, I didn't see the park benches. They had folding chairs by the time I remember going
Yeah.
there, but I marked a couple of things. I have a question, if you don't mind me asking. When they brought
Okay.
in the stock tank and filled it with water in the movie theater, how in the world did they empty the water?
You know, I was only 18 years old or 8 years old. I didn't think about those things, so I really have no idea.
I just can imagine them hauling it back out by pitchers or buckets, I suppose,
Yes,
but
something like that.
that would not
Because
have been
I'm pretty
easy.
sure there was no plumbing on that stage in that theater.
I'm sure there was not either. And then when you talked about Morton Edmonds driving the van to deliver groceries to the townspeople, wow, that went away quickly
Yeah.
and now it has returned.
Yeah. Yep.
It's amazing how things go around and come around. But
All
your
of
your
those.
reunion
Yeah.
your reunion experiences, all of this that you talk about, what a wonderful legacy you have, and I know you're passing it on to children and grandchildren and great grandchildren.
Yeah.
And congratulations on your two newest little twins.
We thank you. They're beautiful.
Well, thank you again. What a wonderful, I don't even want to call it a story. It's a wonderful history that you've shared with us. And I know that it will be very special for other people to listen to as well. So
Well,
thank you.
I've enjoyed doing that, and thank you so much for asking.
You are very welcome. Bye bye now.
Bye.